Hello everyone, welcome back to a Pendle Witch story. In the description I will leave the author's name and where you can find her books, because there are more than this one. And she's very good, though undiscovered I think at the moment, but I like her work. So let's continue with the Pendle Witch story, shall we, and see what happens next. This is Saturday, the 11th of April 1612. Father Christopher stared at me from his seat next to the east wall of the hall. Not the parish church that Granny Janet and Aunt Ellen went to, of course, but the longer walk to the chapel in Salmesbury Hall with Ma and Pa to sit the Easter Vigil. The father took a moment to meet the eyes of the faithful gathered in his ancestral home, and looked pleased to see so many here. Then he looked at me again and gave me a small smile of approval. He were pleased with me learning. He told me so. We have heard the liturgy of the word many times in recent days. We've talked about how our Lord Jesus Christ was betrayed by Judas, one of his own men, his family, just as the one true faith has since been betrayed by Luther, Calvin, and yes, I'm sad to say, even our own misguided King James. His voice echoed in the rafters and reverberated around the large, dark, panelled hall. It were much more interesting here than at Aunt Ellen's church in the village. Christ went to his death, just as our great monasteries and houses of faith were fatally devastated. Our monks, priests, and all the people who relied on them, no, depended on them for absolution, for work, for physique, even for alms, were cast asunder. How many of these good men died on the gallows or atop heretical pyres? How many others and their families died of hunger, of sickness or poverty? How many of your family have suffered as a result of this devastation, this mockery of faith? He paused for a breath. The fervent colour in his usually pale cheeks, hiding but fading as he glared around the hall, shifted in my seat, uneasy now under his gaze. He stood, took a breath, and his voice thundered from his gaunt frame once more. But there is yet hope. On this day, in this week, as we hold vigil for Christ's suffering and resurrection, the very night when Christ rose again, saving us all with his sacrifice, we must also rise, we must also sacrifice. His voice hushed. We must also save those who cannot save themselves. We must bring them back to God and the true faith. The hall fell silent, and Father stepped forward to walk among his congregation and spoke more calmly. I sighed. This could go on for some time. Dawn were yet a long way off. Most of you know my history. You have heard of how a young man, I, fled the heretic queen to join the English college at Douai in France, to pledge my life to the return of true faith to this newly heathen land. I travelled to Rome to continue my studies at the Jesuit college and to be ordained into the priesthood. And then I left that fine, devout, and pious city to risk my life in returning to these shores, despite the dangers. He had reached the far end of the chapel, below the gallery, where those of his family who were still Catholic sat in privacy and overlooked the rest of us. He turned and then walked down the closer aisle, touching shoulders in greeting as he went. I jumped when his voice filled the rafters once more. I have paid a heavy price for my faith, and I've paid it gladly. I've spent many years in many gaols, endured many hardships, yet it has only served to strengthen my faith and my commitment to God. And when King James, in his wisdom, ordered priests of true faith into exile, I was able to secrete myself in this good county and finally able to do the work for which our Lord chose me. He'd reached the front of the hall again and spun, his crimson robes swirling around his lanky legs, and raised his arms. To bring hope, to bring light to this lost land, to bring you the true body and blood of Christ, and to bring you salvation and true absolution. He lowered his arms at his last words. They echoed above. I wasn't able to take my eyes from him, and nobody made a sound as we waited for his next words. Yet, there are even greater dangers than mockery of the true faith. He cast his eyes about the hall. You all know what I'm talking about. Witchcraft. He stooped and opened his arms out to us all. That is right, good people. Witchcraft. Right here, in Lancashire. I winced with every word. I could have knowed to still me sen. None of us are safe. They can be found anywhere. Even, I am sad to say, in my own family. That's right. My own brother's daughter-in-law is one of these handmaidens of the devil, and worse still, she is mother to another Southworth. He waited for the murmuring to cease and nodded his head. Yes, the devil has my nephew within reach, but I shall not let him have the boy. Oh, no. I jumped at his shout. I shall save that boy's soul, and fear, no fear I will have of that, none at all. He glared around the hall, and I'm sure none doubted him. But it is not just my family. There is at least one other affected by this scourge, one of my very own student Grace. I turned the red of Robin's breast as he pointed at me, and tried my best to sink into the bench. Mam pulled away so I couldn't hide in her side, and she hooked the curl of dark hair from my mouth as every bugger watched. I could feel the pricking of tears and unwanted notice, but have no fear. She is also in my care, and you must take heed of those in your care. He turned his gaze around the hall once more. You must save the souls of those you love, but fear not, for I am here to aid you in your godly endeavours. And that's the end of part 2. Well, it does give a very good, exciting sermon, I do agree. And I do think, I mean, I'm more Catholic anyway. Catholicism is more my thing than anything else, but that's because I'm a really old style Catholic, where we're brought up. But yeah, his sermons seemed very good. I would have listened if I'd have been sat there and he'd been doing that. I would have definitely paid attention. Anyway, that's part 2, guys. Thank you for tuning in to listen, and many blessings.